So I'm going to be talking about the Virginia Woolf piece that we read. Just a few things that stood out to me while I was reading the text and how I interpreted them. So one of the first things that stood out to me was how people worried about Julia and her well-being. Um, it talks about the principal of the school where Julia works, just worrying about how she's going to be, like how well off she's going to be. And the piece of textual evidence that I used to support that idea is Miss Cray was left badly off, Miss Kingston was afraid, at her brother's death. Her brother Julius was, of course, a very well-known man, a famous archaeologist. So people just worried about Julia's well-being and pity her because she probably doesn't make a lot of money just being a piano teacher with a few students. And it's kind of assumed during this time that women are dependent upon the male figures in their lives, whether that be their father, their brother, their husband, whoever it may be in their lives that's a male, probably would provide for them. So it's kind of just odd that Julia is okay with not having a male figure in her life. And Fanny kind of wonders this, why hasn't Julia gotten married yet? And why has she never been married? And then she remembers that none of Julia's siblings were married either, which is also kind of odd. And at one point, Julia also called men ogres, and that part of the text says, "They're ogres," she had said one evening, half laughing, when another pupil, a girl lately married, suddenly bethinking her that she would miss her husband, had rushed off in haste. "They're ogres," she had said, laughing grimly. An ogre would have interfered, perhaps, with breakfast in bed, with walks down to the river at dawn. So Julia kind of thinks that ogres are gross, unromantic creatures, so they don't really have a purpose, and that goes back to her thinking, she doesn't really need a man because there's no true purpose to having a man in her life. So she's pretty unconventional for her time. And she also says that she doesn't want kids, and just the thought of kids gives her a headache. So what would have happened, but one could hardly conceive this, had she had children? She took astonishing precautions against chills, fatigue, rich food, the wrong food, droughts, heated rooms, journeys in the tube, for she could never determine which of these it was exactly that brought on those terrible headaches that gave her life the semblance of a battlefield. So Julia just doesn't like the thought of being a mother because there's so many duties and responsibilities that one takes on when they decide to be a mother. So Julia just kind of likes doing things her own way. And another thing that kind of supports this is when she's repeating the phrase, "Slater's pins have no points." And I know that when we were in class, we were talking about, maybe that means, men have, we compared the pins to men. I kind of thought of it differently, where pins, you're pinning things down, kind of like society's expectations, pin you down, hold you back. Going back to like Julia's independence, she doesn't see a point in following people's expectations, doing what people would think, or what people expect. So rather than seeing, Julia's independence as a weakness, she sees this as a strength. She kind of admires it, and she doesn't really pity Julia for her choosing to be independent. So there's just different things that Julia does and how she acts that aren't conventional. So her lesbian moment with Fanny, unacceptable. Not having a husband, unacceptable. No kids, unacceptable. So just the way that Julia goes about her life is just really not acceptable for a woman of this time. And that's what makes this, Virginia Woolf piece stand out, is that it's showing a woman going against the grain, kind of. And rather than another woman, like, being like, why aren't you living life? Like, why aren't you a mom? Fanny is also like, hey, screw it, let's be lesbians. And yeah, that's how I took this.